Hello again and welcome back to the PhatPhish Guitar Studio. I'm Dave, and in this video I want to talk about the idea of whether you're playing something right or you're playing it wrong, and perhaps you might be worrying about that more than you need to. I'll start off by playing something by way of a quick example, something which I'm sure you'll recognise. Now, some of you will be screaming now and going straight to the comments section to tell me that I'm playing that wrong. You recognise it and you're telling me that what I should have been playing is because that piece of music, it's the intro for Summer of '69 by Bryan Adams, and you know that that's how you play it. It's a D chord down to an A chord. But think about what it was I was playing. I was playing up here. I was playing a D chord to an A chord. I was playing what the piece of music is. I was just using a different chord inversion, a different shape to what you might have learned and regard as being the right one, because that's either what your guitar teacher showed you, that's what you've seen Bryan Adams or Keith Scott playing, or if you've seen the band live or you've seen music videos or whatever, you know that these open position chords are the right way to play it. But here's the thing, if I was playing that wrong, how do you know I was playing it wrong? Because you obviously recognised what I was playing and knew that it was Summer of '69. So if I was playing it and you knew what it was, it can't have been wrong, could it? You see what I mean? I was just playing it differently. That's the way that I choose to play that introduction. And that's what I want to talk about in this video, is the idea of if something is not an exact carbon copy, an exact facsimile of how a piece of music, like an existing piece of music was played, does it mean that you're playing it wrong if you're playing it differently? And a lot of times the answer is no, you're just playing it your way, you're playing it your interpretation of it. Now there's a few ways where you can deviate from the original piece of music. For example, just the styling of it, you know, like that example there, playing a different chord inversion because it suits you for some reason, playing it with a dirtier sound or a cleaner sound, playing it on a different instrument perhaps to what the original was. So it's certainly not going to be a carbon copy, but you can still play that piece of music and it's still recognizable and still kind of true enough to the original. Or you could do something even more extreme and play it in a different style. And this is something that I love, is where you get a band from one genre who take music from completely out of their style, but interpret it with their own voice. You know, I've got an album I bought back in the days when I used to buy lots of CDs. Rock Swings by Paul Anka. You know, it's got like Bon Jovi tunes and stuff on there, but it's played by Paul Anka in the style of like a 1950s swing big band, and it's awesome. Another one I would recommend is a band called Gregorian, who are like, it's very gothic Gregorian chant music, but they do an absolutely awesome version of Hell's Bells by AC/DC. That's still totally recognisable as Hell's Bells by AC/DC because it's using the chords, it's using the melody, but it's being played in a completely different way, but it's still true to the original. So let's talk about some of the ways where you would want to do it something that's wrong. So you might want to do something different that's not a carbon copy of the original, just to suit your personal circumstances. You might have a different configuration of band to what the original band was. Now, a good example of this would be where you have a 2-guitar band and you're playing one of their songs, but you only have one guitar. And what you will often find is where there's two guitarists, or even where it's something that's been recorded in the studio and you've got one guitarist who can record multiple tracks, the individual guitar parts will be slightly different, and they come together into this whole. But if you're trying to play that as a single guitar player, you can't play any of the guitar parts from the original record because they're all, it's like parts of a whole. You need to kind of consolidate them together. So that might mean using a different chord voicing. If you had a one where like a rhythm part was, one guitar part was just like basic power chords, and then the other guitar part was the more higher, more complex chord tones from extended chords played in a higher register. You'd have to kind of glom those together in some way into single, a single chord that you could play rather than where you've got these fragments, if you see what I mean. Or you might be taking the exact opposite of that, where you've got a guitar part which was originally recorded with it for a single rhythm guitar, and you're in a band where you've got two guitar players. You could take those chords and you could break them apart and have one guitar player is playing more like chordal type of things, and the other guitarist is playing more complex arpeggios around the same chords, but playing it differently to the original, and it kind of makes it your own thing. And another reason why you might want to do it in terms of logistics is things like tunings. Now, I played that example at the start, which was a D chord down to an A chord. Or I actually played it like that. Neither of those examples were a D chord down to an A chord. Reason? This guitar is actually tuned down a half step. I'm down to E flat standard. So what I was actually playing was D flat down to A flat. Now, if I wanted to play something that was true to the original, then I could capo and play those open chords. If I don't have a capo at hand, then I can play the way I was. So that's genuinely a D chord down to an A chord. But because the chord shapes I was using were bar chords, they're movable chords, I can move them up the neck to change the key, which is a useful device. You might even have a case where your singer struggles or isn't as comfortable with the original key of the song, and you just want to pitch the whole song to a different key. That's completely valid, but you're not playing the song as it was recorded. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong. For me, though, the most important reason for playing something, air quotes, wrong, is to make it your own. I really don't see the point in learning somebody else's song verbatim and just playing it exactly like it was on the original recording. What are you contributing to the sum of human musicality if all you're doing is just doing an exact facsimile of something that already exists? You should play it in some way, make it your own, whether you're experimenting with different chord voices, different phrasing, different guitar tones, different something. There's a line in the movie Crossroads, the one with the big Steve Vai guitar duel at the end, where the old blues man in there, Willie Brown, is telling his young protege, the thing with blues is you need to take the music past where you found it. And I think that's an important thing to bear in mind when you're learning somebody else's song. Use it as a starting point, but add something of your own and build on that in some way. There's an old phrase, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. So if you're presented with a song and you want to make it your own, you want to do something with it, how can you do that? What things are available to help us as musicians to take a song and make it into our own? Well, this is where it's really useful to understand music theory. So having a good chord vocabulary helps. So you could think about different ways of playing something with, say, different inversions, different chord shapes, but having the theory knowledge to back that up, so you can understand why you're playing the chords that you are, how you might be able to play different versions of those chords, how the melody works, and how you might be able to play around with that by understanding the theory is really, really useful. By way of an example, let's think about the chord progression. I'm going to play a very, very common chord progression, the Andalusian chord progression, which is basically a 1 minor down to a flat 7 major, flat 6 major, down to a 5 minor. So very common chord progression, pops up all over the place. But I'm playing that there just as open position chords. Now if I wanted, I could play that as bar chords. Same thing. But I could mess around and play different chord types. I could play, that's like 7 chords. It's still playing some kind of 1 chord, but rather than playing just the straight minor, I could play a minor 7. Instead of playing the flat 7 major, I could play the flat 7 dominant 7. The flat 6 major, I could play a flat 6 major 7. And on that last chord, the 5 minor, I could play actually what would sound really good is a 5 dominant 7. Maybe up to a 7 sus 4. There I'm using a bit of music theory knowledge about knowing what chord substitutions I can use. So there's the idea of different chords from the same family, but on that last one there's a bit more theory knowledge coming in about chord substitutions. So rather than having something that goes get something that goes like this. Yeah, it's still recognizable as that chord progression. It's just got its own voice to it. It sounds different. That's like my take on how I want to play the Andalusian chord progression. I could play more complex chords, I could use extended chords, and rather than playing just 1 chord type per bar, I could do like I did on the 5 chord and throw in some other chord types like suspended chords. That sort of thing. It's still recognizable for what it is, but I'm just being creative and making it, like I say, making it my own. I could go the other way and just totally strip it down. I might want to do like a hard rock, heavy metal version of it, where I put on some overdrive and I just play it as power chords. Now that's super basic, super stripped down. I might want to take that and throw in some passing chords, some chords which strictly speaking don't fit that progression, but it still works. I'm just using them as passing chords just to make it a little bit more flavoursome. Yeah, just another way of approaching it. The possibilities are endless, really. If you're into music theory, you can really start to analyse the progression that you're playing and think about what's the fundamental chord type that I'm hearing, how could I extend that, where could I possibly do a chord substitution. Think about what you would want to do with a piece of music to make it your own. Are you stripping it down to bare basics like I was doing there with the progression, but just play it as power chords, or are you wanting to kind of fancy it up and you want to look at more complex chord types, or you want to make it a bit more challenging and you want to add in some outside notes and some chord substitutions that might bring some tension into it? Lots of ways you could approach it, but as I say, having a knowledge of music theory will really help you with that. And similarly with a melody line, you're going to have a melody line for a piece of music that is if you're doing it right, it's a strict set of notes that you would play through in sequence. You can mess around with the phrasing of that, or you could change you can change the notes. Think about what the melody line is and what are the most crucial notes in that melody that you have to hit to make it recognizable. And where would there be some scope for, say, adding in like grace notes or passing notes, just to make the whole thing a little bit more interesting. The important thing is, though, is to make a song your own. Take everything that you've accumulated, your wealth of lived and played and listened musical experience, and bring that to the table. So when you have a song that you want to do a version of, you want to do a cover version of, it isn't a facsimile. You're feeding in everything that you've got as a musician, everything that song is bringing, and making it your own. Being creative, being original. And I love it when I hear a song that I recognise from one place, but another artist has come along and done their spin on it and made it completely their own. Now, a good example of where somebody's done this is the song Word Up by Cameo. Now, this came out in the late 80s, very of its time, very funky, synthy, pop tune. You recognise the progression. It's not a million miles away from the Andalusian progression that I was playing before. It goes like this. Yeah, so it was of its time, quite a funky, synth-driven pop tune from the late 80s. Then a few years later, along came the rock band Gun, and they had a version that goes more like this. Completely different arrangement, different voicing, different style, different everything, but it's still recognisable as Word Up. Then, a little bit after that, Korn did a version. They basically did a kind of a cover version of a cover version, because they apparently think they used to play their version of the Gun cover like a sound checks, and actually this works, let's actually make a thing of it, and recorded it. But it's the Korn version of it, because I don't know if they played in a lower key or they're playing it in the same key, but they're just using like 7 strings, so they get like deeper, lower sounding chord voicings. But it's in their style. It's still kind of in the same ballpark as the Gun cover version compared to the original by Cameo, but it's definitely distinct as a Korn version rather than the Gun version. And there's other versions there. One of the Spice Girls, Mel B, did a cover version of it, which is poppy, still got a bit of the original Cameo feel to it, but it's much more of its time, with her distinctive sort of style. There's a version by Little Mix, which I'll be honest, I'm not familiar with. I know I've heard it, which is very poppy. It's very much a Little Mix thing. There's somebody else, I think it was a German artist, did a version. I've forgotten who they are, but theirs was a bit of a mashup. It had bits of other songs sampled or included in there. But all those versions in very different styles are all recognisable as Word Up, that was originally done by Cameo. And I think my personal favourite is the Gun version. It's the one I'm most familiar with. It's great, but at no point do I ever find myself screaming into my MP3 player or whatever, screaming, "No, you're playing it wrong. That shouldn't be a power chord. That should be a fully voiced major chord." No, because I recognise it's their version and it's bringing something to the table that I really like. So, kind of summing up, playing other people's music is useful. It helps us to develop as musicians. We will be challenged to play things that we might not otherwise play, because we're getting them from somebody else. But the important thing is not to be just doing a slavish facsimile. Interpret it, make it your own. Even the changes might be subtle, might just be a little bit of like slightly different rhythm pattern or different chord inversions or something, but strive to make it your own. I think there's sort of 3 tests you can apply for, is the end result valid? You know, so let's not have a binary discussion, but is it right or is it wrong? Is you've done something that's different, is it valid? First test, do you like it? Do you think this is something, the end result, is something that you want to hear? Is it something that you think other people would like and you want to share with them, and you want them to hear you're happy with the way that it sounds and you think other people are going to dig it? That's the first test. Not about, you know, is it musically complex and therefore good, just do you like it? Second question is, does it represent the original song? Does it do it justice? If you're doing a cover version of a song, is your cover version recognizable as a cover version of that song, and it's respectful and it does justice to it? It's different, yes, that's the point of all of this, but is it still kind of representative of the source material? And lastly, sort of linked to the previous one, is, does it take that original source material past where you found it? Can you listen to that cover version back and say, yes, there's something in there that I added or something that I changed and I made it my own? It's my version of it rather than just a copy. And if you can answer yes to those 3 questions, then what you're doing is absolutely valid. And if someone sees you playing that and says, no, that's the wrong chord type, or you're playing the wrong chord shape, or you've added in a grace note there where there wasn't a grace note on the original, you can defend yourself. You say, no, what I'm doing is valid because I had those 3 questions I was able to ask myself, and I answered yes to all of them. The cover version is valid, therefore it is not wrong. It's not a copy of the original. So if that's your definition of being right, okay, it's not right, but it isn't wrong. It's about being yourself and being creative. So hopefully that's inspired you and maybe can make you think a little bit differently about what you do when you're approaching playing somebody else's music. Okay, thanks very much for watching. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please click like down there if you really enjoyed it and you want to see some other videos that I post on the channel. Then click the subscribe button and click the bell icon so you're notified of any new videos as soon as they're uploaded. I'd love to hear your views on this, so please do join in the comment section down there if you want. One thing I will say is that YouTube's a bit rubbish at notifying me when people leave comments on videos. So if there's something specific that you want to ask me, whether it's about guitar playing and music theory, guitar gear, anything at all really, you're better off going here where there's a form you can fill in, the question comes direct to me and I can get around to answering your question in a future video. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.